All right, all you cool cats and kittens. Hope everyone's enjoying their week so far. I am here, Tyler Tolbert, along with our esteemed intern, Peyton Keller.
Hello, hello. How's it going?
Yes, and we are back here for another pre-owner underwater. We have an interesting situation. This is a person who has already found a practice, but has come up with a few concerns as to whether or not they're making the right choice and wants to kind of talk it out with us. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Pullet, and I live out here in Texas, and I found a practice that has some issues.
Pullet is a new word for me, and I imagine it's a new word for a lot of the audience. So would you mind explaining where that comes from?
Sure. Well, as you may know, an adult chicken that is a female laying eggs is called a hen, but
Yeah,
when
I
they're
know
very
that.
young, okay, good. Step one. When they're very young, before they started laying, you might call them a pullet if they're
A
female.
pullet. Okay, and that's Pullet, I understand.
Yes.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, what would you call a baby rooster?
A cockerel.
Oh, that's
Oh,
way cooler.
that's exotic. Who'd have thought?
That's way cooler.
Oh
I
my
don't know.
gosh.
Pullet's cool. We're gonna roll with that, but cockerel is an honorable mention, I gotta say. And Calvin has just made himself known on our video stream here. If the audience isn't aware, Calvin is Peyton's cat, and he always manages to make an appearance by walking across the screen, and will probably do so periodically for the rest of the interview.
I like most of the time can keep it under control, but every once in a while he'll just like walk in front and then like pause and like I can only keep it together for so much, you know.
Yeah. So, sometimes when we're really lucky, when we're really fortunate, Calvin will come by, stop in the middle of the screen, and actually look at it for a while, and just completely obscure Peyton from view, and I appreciate that. So, of course. Yeah, exactly. Calvin likes everyone to know who's really running the show, who's the host here, and already decided to make an appearance. So, without any further ado, Dr. Pullet, tell us a little bit more about. I kind of just want to know where you're coming from, like. You obviously don't have to go into any specifics, but how long you've been out of school, what's your experience like, and what's bringing you into this pursuit of ownership.
I graduated in 2018, so about 2 years now I've been working. And initially, I started working in a Medicaid-heavy practice.
Cool.
Yeah, it had some cool angles to it.
Well, tell me a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like you don't hear a whole lot of people that are working in Medicaid offices. So I'd just be curious about your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this firm was very well organized. I feel like you could do Medicaid with a large corporate firm like I did, or you could do it with a smaller operation. And maybe with the latter, it might be less organized in terms of would you always have the amount of assistants you want? Would they have a system running in the office? Whereas this one was well coordinated.
Cool.
And I do miss that now that I'm working a few days a week in a private setting, which is doing Medicaid too. But
yeah. Okay, interesting. So, I mean, I do have people, I talk to students a lot about what they'll be doing once they get out of school and what kind of different things they can expect in different settings. And Medicaid is not one that it's probably the one I'm least comfortable talking to people about because I just don't know enough. So do you have like any pros and cons? I know this is kind of an aside from what we're here to talk about, but I just think it's super interesting and it tells me a little bit about what your sort of clinical background is. So do you have like any pros and cons and, what makes people right for Medicaid?
Well, when I was brought on board, the hiring team brought up that one of the benefits of having their new grads see a lot of Medicaid patients is that one, they come in and they accept treatment, so that's great with that population.
Okay.
Yeah, not to be undersold on that. And the other is that it's a gateway, especially working with kids, to getting more adult comprehensive care in your chair as the parents hopefully learn to trust you. However, because I was bounced around so many locations, that wasn't the typical case. I didn't usually get a lot of parents coming in to see me again because I might have moved to another office.
So, lack of a continuity of care kind of thing.
Yeah,
exactly. Other benefits were there's some endo to be had as long as you don't have an endodontist, and we worked with specialists with this firm, but no endodontist, so you were able to get that under your belt if you wanted to. You were encouraged to, but you had to use their system. And
very lightly encouraged. Yeah. So do you have like good reps with molar endo? Are you pretty comfortable with doing that?
I would say medium. I was thinking I would get a lot more, but just didn't pan out. You do need to be in a certain location repeatedly, especially going to two-step it, which is typical when you're slower and with a large volume of patients coming in every day.
Okay, so they just kind of had you bouncing around and you weren't always seeing the same patient over time. And so I kind of feel like maybe that was sort of tooth by tooth dentistry for the most part. You weren't having like very comprehensive care, but I'm sure that helped you build up your skills, your speed, had its own advantages.
Yeah, I learned to work with a lot of different staff and personalities, different
Mm.
materials such as Improgum, if you've ever used that. It's a
Never used it, but I
polyether.
hear it. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And
And
you're a fan of polyether?
well, the set time for me was about 8 minutes. Which,
And it
if
doesn't
you've got to
taste or
repeat it,
smell very good, right?
well, it's polyether and not polysulfide. I don't know if you're thinking of the latter. I
I
think it's
might be.
pretty generic
Okay.
smell, similar to
Okay.
PBS.
But it's
High
8 minutes.
detail. Yeah, eight
Yeah.
minutes is really gonna throw you for a loop. You've got to retake the impression because there's
Yeah.
blood, and there is. So,
Okay. All right. Cool. So Medicaid experience. Did you do that for the past 2 years, or did you have any other opportunity? I think you said you'd already had some kind of new dynamic going on.
that was for about a year and a half.
Okay.
Uh, so in between that position, Medicaid, and my current one, which is another Medicaid but smaller office, there's actually a third opportunity, which was more geared towards orthodontics.
Hmm.
Is ortho something you'd see yourself doing in the future?
Well, I took that step to see if I would love doing that day in, day out.
Yeah.
Of course, because it's much easier on your body. It's a very mental exercise, which appealed. Uh, but in that particular opportunity, just didn't really pan out the way I thought it would.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. So do you still maybe? I mean, do you feel like you got some experience in ortho that you could apply into this new opportunity that you have? Is that something you consider a skill that you're bringing to the table?
Definitely, I'll be
Oh, cool.
bringing that clear aligner experience into my current practice. I do feel like, although the plan was to be involved at a full-time position and be really inundated with that knowledge, I
Yeah.
think I could have learned it a little more part-time, maybe working and doing some cases while doing general
Cool.
dentistry might have been the better move.
Very cool. Awesome. So, interesting fact, Peyton and I very recently took a clear aligner course. It was not so comprehensive as to talk about, the fundamentals of, I mean, it did go over fundamentals of treatment planning, but it was more so about doing in-house aligner fabrication using 3D printing and digital planning with Blue Sky Bio. It was Baron Gruder's course, and it was fascinating stuff, and definitely made me. It kind of gave me an itch for simple class one ortho and clear aligner therapy. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, do y'all print or mill? I know there's some difference there.
Right. So that's printing the models at different stages, and then doing suck down for actually fabricating the aligners themselves. Yeah, but you're digitally planning and printing it in house. Let's talk a little bit about so you've had various jobs in various settings here, and how it seems like you're at a juncture where you're saying practice ownership is for me. You're deciding to engage with that, which I congratulate you on. What brought you to that point?
Well, I bounced around between Medicaid and then maybe thinking residency with ortho. One of the driving factors for looking at ortho was this is hard on my body doing Medicaid and doing your own cleanings,
Oh,
especially 5 days a week and Saturdays you see 20 patients. It's intense
yeah,
mentally, physically, right?
of course. Yeah,
And especially without your own maybe dental chair or something. And I'm in my 30s. Okay,
yeah.
so that's a big one. But after talking to our mutual friends,
Hmm.
it just seems like as an owner, you can really dictate your own schedule, not only on a macro level, getting vacation time whenever you want, but also more micro managing and just making sure you get the production you need, but also you're able to ergonomically, function throughout the day. That was a big thing. And
Yeah,
then lastly, yeah,
I was gonna say, like, with your experience in Medicaid, like the ownership responsibilities you'll be taking on won't be nearly as hard on your body. I mean, it'll be more of a mental challenge, but it won't be like you're hurting your back every day, neck, all that kind of stuff. So I can definitely see how that would be something that you would want.
yeah, even the ability to incorporate a microscope, which maybe I'm the only one, but I really enjoyed that rotation in school. I felt
Yeah,
like I could do better work, and I felt like I was faster. So
it's very cool. I have kind of gone back and forth, getting a microscope. I think it comes down to like how much endo I would see myself doing, but it's not just for endo. Like you can do a whole lot of stuff with it. I recently started watching Stefan Felon dental seminars, and for years now he's been using a microscope and has mounted like a 4K, a 4K webcam on it, and like films all of his dentistry that he does. And it's phenomenal. Like you're just seeing everything he does on just such a micro level, and it's really beautiful. But I obviously, aside from just being a dental nerd, I can definitely see where the ergonomics come into play. So that it seems like that's coming up a lot for you. Is that something that, it seems like that's kind of motivating you to go into ownership, just knowing that, physically long term, that sort of like toil of just the daily, drill fill bill is kind of going to, take a toll on your body in the long term. Is that resonating with you?
Yeah, it was a bigger worry. Now I'm working 2 days a week, and it's just not as bad. I'm still doing my own cleanings, so that's better. So being an owner, you'll be able to make more money and have the freedom to use the technology and the scheduling to just create your own way to do the quality dentistry you want to do.
Yeah.
At the speed you want to do.
Right. And to be able to delegate the things that you don't want to do. And that's a perfectly reasonable thing for a business owner to do. I think you have an excellent skill set, and I think you're primed for that kind of thing. And you have some really good motivations going towards that. So, generally when we're having this sort of conversation with people, they are sort of like, they're in media res, they're looking for practices and they're trying to figure out how to find the right one and putting their vision together. But you kind of already are a little bit further ahead in that process. So can you tell us a little bit about that and kind of catch us up?
Where am I farther ahead at?
Most of the people that we bring on, they'll have a practice in mind, but they're also kind of searching for other practices and trying to make sure that what they're finding is agreeing with the vision that they have. But you kind of came to us and we're like, yeah, I kind of already have something in mind. I believe you said you'd already put an LOI in. Is that correct?
Yes, we've put in an LOI and we've started drafting the purchase agreement. So yeah, we've zeroed in on a practice. So the part of the vision, I'll be honest, we kind of came upon it backwards. We started just shadowing 2 practice owners, one we all know, and then another y'all haven't met who's out in another part of the state.
Okay.
So shadow them, and then I just sent an email to a broker I'd already been in touch with a year prior, but we just had stayed out of contact. And he had just sent me an email about this practice, and it just seemed to fit a lot of the like seeds of dreams that were starting to sprout. And so I'll kind of go into what they were.
Please.
One was, as I've been advised, find the biggest practice monetarily, whose production you can reproduce predictably. So that all fit. We can go into that a little more. It's also in a location that is not a dream for many, but it had some perks. It's within an hour of both my husband and my family. However you say that grammatically correctly.
Our family. It's all good. Yeah, perfect.
That's great.
So near the families, and then it's somewhat rural, and that appealed because I like pullets and other animals.
Naturally, yeah, of course. Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about location. You said that is that going to be somewhere pretty close to where you're living? The commute is something you'd be happy with and everything?
So the plan is to move within at least half an hour of the practice, which would put us, kind of the midway point between the major metroplex near us and that practice.
Okay. And so the population density of pullets in that area is satisfactory for you?
It allows for the density I require in my vicinity.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So, all right. So then the location is good, and it fulfilled this thing that you had heard about trying to buy the biggest practice that you could monetarily manage. So tell me a little bit more about that, because that's an interesting thing to kind of be a guiding force for you.
Okay, well, a rule of thumb I've heard kicked around from several sources, so it must be true, is that a single dentist could be producing
consensus
based on bread and butter dentistry alone about 1.2 to 1.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking for a practice maybe doing around $1 million. And then looking at the procedures, see if that was, oh, that's my husband in the bike suit, doing around $1 million maybe in bread and butter.
Okay. So one thing that we try to identify in terms of the vision that people have for practices, and you do have some things kind of going into it that you see for yourself at ownership. I mean, you're talking about being able to manage your time more efficiently, not breaking your back, just trying to produce things, trying to preserve yourself ergonomically speaking, and just having a little bit more control over what your workday is like. And that's totally valid. But we kind of like to look at what the actual practice vision is. So you have like different archetypes of types of practices. You have, solo offices that are smaller, maybe up to about 5 ops or so, with maybe just one dentist checking several hygienists. Sometimes there can be another person involved and they stagger the hours, or it's like a larger office. It's an associate or multiple associates and a number of hygienists. And we refer to that, of course, as group practice. And both of those kind of have different dynamics and different advantages for different personalities. So have you kind of identified like group or a solo model as something that you identify with?
To be honest, I don't have a firm vision for what I want the practice to look like. I just still
Okay.
have these shapes, and a lot of them are driven by my family goals, being a mother at some point,
Yeah.
and having the flexibility to practice and also come home when I want to, in a schedule I like. And I think that will fit well with at least a part-time associate.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. No. That makes sense. I mean, generally, people that have those sorts of constraints will tend towards the larger practices just because you can kind of lean on someone else to be producing when you're away. And, the other side of that is, you could have the smaller practice that produces a lot, but you just, work a couple days a week. You just kind of have less hours. So people kind of tend to approach that a little bit differently. And, generally this is something we kind of explore on the front end before we even start looking for practices. But something has
yeah.
fallen into your lap and we got to talk about it. We got to see if maybe it could work, right? Yeah. So tell us what has fallen in your lap. What are you looking at? Tell me about this practice in general.
Well, first of all, this practice is pretty large physically. It's 4,000 square feet, but it
Yeah.
has 9 ops.
Okay.
So, whoa, it's way bigger than my friends' practices and the ones I've
I,
worked at.
I would
So,
imagine so.
yeah, one of the ops, so it's a soft 9. I would say it's 8. One of them is just used for storage, but does have a chair, it's equipped, etc.
Mhm.
Let's see, it's split into 2 wings. I'll just kind of leave it at that. And these 2 wings are connected by a lab and a break room, like a really long semi hallway
Okay.
composed of those 2 components.
So it's not like a continuous space. They're kind of like chopped up weird. Is that what you're saying?
One half was added on.
Okay, gotcha.
I see. Okay. Interesting. So it's got 2 wings, somewhat like a pullet, if you will. And I had to, sorry. Um, yeah. Okay. So how is this practice performing? What's its kind of history? What do you know about it?
It's been pouring well, just under 1 million for the last 3 years, and half of that has been hygiene production, roughly, which stood out to us. Uh, Also, that hygiene production has almost no perio. I think under 3 full mouths of SRPs were done last year. So
Oh,
hopefully a lot of room for growth, even within hygiene. And this is with about 1.3 doctors, you could say. So it seems that it's been underproducing, but still doing around 1 million.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree that it's been sort of underproducing. So, do you know essentially how those 9 ops are being used with the 1.3 doctors? And how many hygienists do we have as well?
There are 3 hygienists. I
Okay.
believe 2 are in one wing and one is in another.
Okay.
And it's
Are they
4 days a
are they
week.
working full time? The hygienists.
Yeah, there are 3 full-time hygienists.
Okay. Yeah, I just be curious with the 53% hygiene. Like that's just objectively that feels like a gold mine. I'd be curious to see like how the numbers actually break down, but I mean that sounds really good.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Hopefully,
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
believable.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, honestly, like it's very interesting. Like this is the first time I've seen a 9 op practice with 2 doctors and 3 hygienists in this big 4,000 square foot building. It's doing under 1 million. I mean, that is certainly under producing. I mean, most definitely, like there's a whole lot of solo offices that are doing better than that. And generally we look for these sorts of group practices to be doing more. So, um, in your sort of due diligence aspect of things, have you been able to kind of look through the production by procedures and sort of get an idea of what's actually being produced in the practice? Is it mostly bread and butter, or what's being done in there on the doctor side?
Yeah, they are mostly doing bread and butter, leaning heavily on crowns. I actually try to do George's formula of the crown to
Mhm.
filling ratio, or crown to
Yeah.
large filling, and it appeared to be about 4 to 1,
Okay.
which was a little high. Definitely not ideal.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the 4-to-1 thing, it I would say it's a little bit on the high side. I mean, generally we like to see numbers between like 1 and 2, lower being the better, just because that means that they're already being kind of conservative in that realm, and you coming in, generally people are treating that sort of same situation with an indirect more so than a large filling, and so that could represent sort of a bump in bread and butter production without necessarily having to diagnose more. Um, 4 is not like astronomically high though. Just like full disclosure, like I've seen them in the high teens, and those are, they kind of ping a little bit, and I'm like, that's interesting. Um, but I wouldn't say that a 4-to-1 is like, yeah, I wouldn't say that the 4-to-1 is like a terrible, red flag or anything that makes me suspicious at all by any means. But yeah, to me, I think what I would want to kind of get a better idea of is just like how that hygiene percentage ended up being quite so high, and what's kind of being left off the table diagnostically for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say, to pitch in on that crown ratio, like I would be more concerned about it if their hygiene ratio was like 20%. But something tells me like even if they are diagnosing more crowns than like 3 to 4 surface fillings than the normal practice, they're still way underdiagnosing overall.
Right. Yeah,
So
the towel is not being wrung by any means, for sure. So I do, I would be optimistic about your ability to sort of go in there and have some internal growth just by having more diagnosis going on in the practice, and treating the things that are there. We never ask people to treat things that aren't. So that's interesting. So what other sorts of low hanging fruit have you kind of identified here?
Well, they refer out almost all surgical extractions
Okay.
and then most of their endo,
Okay.
not all of it. And I think they only do prophies for kids. So
Mhm.
hopefully we can get plenty of kids in the door because that's something I have a strong handle on from my Medicaid
Great.
experience.
Yeah, of course. That's awesome. So, it seems like you would be able to, replace what's already being done, and you can throw on some endo, some ortho treatment, potentially, some other things. So you kind of already have your ducks in a row, clinically speaking. Um, do you know much about, the new patient? I mean, this is obviously a larger practice. You see yourself having an associate dentist that'll be there as well. Do you know what the patient flow is kind of looking like?
Uh, they have said about 15 per month on average.
Okay. Yeah. So, as far as their marketing efforts and such, is there a whole lot going on in the way of that?
It appears they have Google reviews and they're stellar, but no website, and expenditures are like $300 a month, something like
so
that.
nothing basically.
Wow.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah. Practically nothing. So
Yeah.
how many Google reviews do they have? Is
I
it
believe it's around 45.
okay? Yeah,
And
it's a decent amount.
is there surrounding practices that have a lot of reviews too, or what? I kind of guess what's the competition like?
Yeah, so competition definitely almost everybody has better visibility, and generally everybody has a website, maybe with one exception.
Hmm.
And a lot of people are doing CEREC, which I found interesting.
Okay. Um, yeah. So speaking of visibility, where is this practice located? What's its sort of setting? Does it have any street visibility?
It does have street visibility, but the street is a smaller road parallel to the major one that most of the competition is on, in about a mile south. It is behind or to the side of a major grocery store,
Okay.
uh, but not a particularly fancy one. It's the surrounding houses, like directly adjacent, are pretty nice, well kept, but modest. And then about 5 blocks around it, you're getting into a little bit more uh, less well taken care of areas.
Sure. Yeah, I understand. So, I mean, my biggest concern in terms of external growth, in terms of being able to, grow the practice and have it perform like a group practice and not like an underperforming. Uh, I mean, certainly doing under 1 million with two dentists in there is, not quite living up to its full potential. I'd want to see plenty of internal growth, of course, and a lot more diagnosis happening. And I'd also want to see external growth. I want to see more patients being brought into the practice. Generally, our rule of thumb that we use is that for every doctor in the practice, we want to be seeing at least about 25 new patients a month. So seeing that we're at 15, we're looking at over tripling that new patient flow, right? Um, the mitigating factor there is the good news is that there's only about $300 per month being spent on marketing, which is like totally negligible, really. So, there's definitely some stones being left unturned there in terms of marketing the practice, getting those Google reviews up. I mean, 45 is okay, but it sounds like it's kind of got some competition and needs to sort of assert itself a little bit better. And there's a lot that could be done in the way of bringing new patients in for sure. So how do is that something you've kind of identified and have some, reservations about, or?
Well, the tactics that I've identified, low hanging fruit might be one,
Mhm.
make a website, make a good one.
That's a big one. Yeah.
A good start. That's solid.
I'm interested in doing mailers, a series of
Okay.
3 in a row, introduce myself. Yeah, the practice. There are 2,400 active patients. So knowing where they're drawing from and then making sure I'm participating in those communities should be a good way to encourage their friends and family to keep coming or
And
come
is
now.
this like, it's like a kind of a smaller town, correct?
Yeah, I would say so.
So it's
Not
like more
tiny.
of a close knit, like you'd see people that you would know around.
Yes, the owners
Okay.
did say they don't go
Gotcha.
to that next door grocery store because they would know a lot of people.
Yeah. So I
Right.
feel like
Okay.
communities like that are ones where like your local events can really shine. Just because like everyone kind of knows everyone, and like if someone's like, oh, this office has a new owner, they're throwing like an event for people to come. I feel like that's kind of where communities and where like those events really shine. So I definitely feel like you could benefit from something like that.
Yeah, I think the owners did mention they have a lot of retired folks and older, so perhaps going to nursing homes or similar assisted living or wherever those people congregate would be good. Hopefully, with healthier times.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course. In terms of the sellers, I mean, have you, seller or sellers, have you spoken to them and got any idea about what their sort of ideas are about their transition and how they feel?
Yeah, so in the LOI, it's already been specified that one of the sellers will be staying on. He's suggesting 2 days a week for up to 2 years, and the salary capped at around 80,000 in the year. The other seller is planning to retire.
Okay. Um, how do you feel about that?
Well, the we'll see if we get along. We're definitely different in terms of culture. He might be more similar to a dental professor, your archetypal dental professor, perhaps.
Say no
Whereas,
more. Yeah, I'm exposed to that a little more than I'm comfortable with, but
Too
sure, go
much.
ahead.
Oh man.
too soon. Yeah, I would identify as not like that. Kind of
Yeah.
nerdy and
Okay.
So
Cool. Yeah.
if it was your choice, would you prefer not to have that there? Would you rather just a complete buyout?
well, honestly, I'm torn. I see great value in having someone back you up, having been the solo doc quite a bit in the last couple months, especially someone who knows the clientele or patients. But if we don't get along or staff are running to that person with issues, especially if they don't find me to be the cultural fit, that would really be a stressor for me.
Yeah. I hmm. So you talk about leaning on them a little bit, and just sort of like having them there as the person that was already there. Kind of tell me a little bit more about that feeling, like you're feeling that they need to kind of be there to back you up.
Well, mostly taking on surgical extractions. Although I realize these sellers have been referring them out. That's something that has tripped me up, recently in the past couple of weeks. So having another pair of eyeballs, something like that, I definitely see value in that. Although, honestly, they may not be that helpful.
Yeah, and do you like the idea of them potentially being there for 2 years as well?
2 years seems extremely long.
It is.
It feels
It really
long.
is.
Yeah.
Does that ever happen?
Yeah. No, I mean it. I'm sure it's happened. I'm sure it's not terribly uncommon. Um, but I kind of I feel that you have to, just from the short time that I've gotten to know you here on this interview, I feel that you have a lot of competence in terms of being able to be the the dentist and diagnose dentistry and treat patients and potentially be a leader of a larger practice. And looking at how this practice has been doing up to this point, I don't know how the production per provider broke down, but on the whole, this practice was not performing wonderfully. I mean, it for the architecture it has, for the space it has, for the capacity that it has, it really wasn't churning out a whole lot of dentistry. And given some of your exposure, given your composure, talking about the sort of things that you can do, I don't really see you having a whole lot of clinical dependency on someone sticking around for that. And honestly, I kind of really only see that potentially being a roadblock. Personally.
Well, thank you for that input.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think 6 months might be more ideal, getting the introductions underway. I
Sure.
think that's 40% fee for service. So that's a significant component. And I hear they need a more, handheld transition.
Yeah,
ideally.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. By the way, I am picking up on you saying that you heard a lot of things.
I feel like this situation could be a good use of like George's mantra, like your price, my terms. So if you do find that you feel like it's a good offer, you can offer them the full price and be like, hey, okay, I got, not obviously word this in a more delicate way, but give them like the money they want and be like, okay, I did that. Now here is kind of what I want on my end. So maybe you could shorten up that, seller work back to 6 months like you wanted.
Yeah, and we definitely already had the contingency or the plan that I can cut it short whenever I want. So that's good.
Oh, okay.
But maybe even saying the expectation of 6 months might be good too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree. And I like that clause is there. I think that's important. That you would have the agency to do that, which I mean, you would have it anyway, but just so that they know that there's a high likelihood that could happen. I'm honestly kind of curious as to why they want to hang around anyway, to be frank. But yeah, like I love that Payton brings that up because you do have some bargaining power here. Do you know how long this practice has been on the market, by the way?
I don't. The appraisal was listed recently, during pandemic times, or was dated then. This is snooping on a Facebook group that one of the sellers is also part of, and they mentioned they had entertained and met some candidates from a DSO. They really wanted to sell to a young dentist, and they wanted to have input on who took over the practice because they care about their patients so much.
That's beautiful.
That's you. I love you right there.
Yeah, and you're going to take amazing care of them. So you are an asset, and you're what they're looking to sell to. And I think I see for you the need to sort of identify yourself as someone that can take this over and grow it into something that it kind of wants to be. I mean, this practice has 50% hygiene production, and it's got tons of room for growth to be that sort of larger. More profitable practice that will lend you this sort of, life where you're in charge of your own, clinical duties and you're able to do things that are a lot easier on your back and you're able to have this sort of time off. Like, you are an asset and you're what these people have been looking for. And I don't think you should be terribly shy about stating what it is that you want and what it is that you envision for the transition. So I'll ask you this, if nothing were off the table and this all went how you want it to go and it was your dream, how would this transition really look for you?
Well, I would have the seller stay on 6 months, and all he would do would be sit around the office and make jokes, make all the staff happy, and he would introduce me to people and say, I'm Dennis he's been waiting for, and I do all his dental work. And then he would ride off in the sunset because he sold his very expensive house and moved wherever he wanted to move.
Okay. All right. Well, let's start from there. Like, if that's what your ideal transition looks like, I'm happy with that. It sounds like you're happy with that. And I think that's a very reasonable thing to come forward with. So I would definitely try to kind of talk down that whole 2-year transitional period thing because, I just kind of see that stunting things. You should be stepping into this and becoming a leader in this community, someone that's maybe not seen around the grocery store. Maybe you don't frequent it yourself, but at least they would know you if you were there. And I see you kind of stepping into that and really growing this thing out both internally and externally. I mean, I think this it's an interesting opportunity. And I think probably one of the biggest things that's going to be in your way is getting more patients into the office. I think that the internal stuff is going to work itself out because you are going to have that sort of diagnostic ability. You're going to be able to bring more things in the practice. You're very comfortable treating kids and all sorts of things. I think your biggest rock, and it's not a non-negotiable. It's not something that says no, this is not a great opportunity. But the biggest one is definitely getting more patients in the practice through enhancing the marketing efforts for sure. And I want you to kind of come in with that expectation that that's going to be probably your biggest inhibition to growth right out of the bat.
Yeah. Do you have any feedback on the location being well? Okay. I also didn't mention. So we talked about where it is near neighborhood and etc. The growth of the town is actually occurring south, well south. There's actually a belt of a highway for
Mm-hmm.
that bounds the lower. I don't know. It's the southern boundary near the practice,
Okay,
and then below that is where all the growth is happening.
I
All the
follow.
new practices are. Do you see that as a barrier, or
Do you, first of all, do you know much about like how far people are commuting generally to get to the practice?
I don't. I have a general impression from things the seller said during our meeting. Some people come from a nearby satellite college town. Some
Hmm.
people come from the city because they work there, but they're commuting from other small towns.
Okay.
But I don't have any hard numbers. Is that something I can get?
Uh, Potentially.
I
Peyton, do
guess
you have any?
another question would be, I know you said they're kind of, you said a lot of the newer practices are south. Do people have to drive by your practice to get there, or your potential practice, or are they coming more from like like coming from the south?
It's a great question. I would imagine most are coming from the south and east.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, these are things that you'll certainly be exploring through your due diligence period, with your team as they kind of take a closer look at, where practices are coming from, and you kind of look at some demographics and stuff like that. There are certainly companies like Dentographics and others that can sort of pull some of those reports and give you a better idea of, what the population to dentist ratio and all kinds of sorts of, marketing sounding things are. But I think you've already kind of unveiled some good ideas. I like the idea of mailers, especially for this general area being a little more rural. If there's sort of an older population there, I think that that's going to be pretty effective as well. I would definitely encourage you to look into Swell. So that's a marketing company that can tremendously improve the amount of Google reviews you get. So that's going to kind of help you with the younger population as well. A lot of them shop via Google reviews, and you want, whenever someone searches a dentist in your area, for yours to be one of the highest priority ones that pop up on that first page, because whoever goes to the second page and whoever scrolls down. So you're definitely going to want to do that, have more of an online presence, get that website. I wouldn't trip up too much on SEO, but just make sure it's a nice mobile compatible website with videos and all the sorts of array of things that you can offer. Don't use stock photos, get some real photos taken of the team and yourself and your whole story and who you are. And I would anticipate that things could improve for sure. Also, you want to look at how things are being handled on the phones. How are the calls coming to the practice being handled? Or calls being missed? How is it all just going sort of through the front desk? Is it is there potential that you could have a company that would take those calls on the weekends and stuff when no one's there? That's another potential area of opportunity that can sometimes double the amount of new patients that you're having coming in. So you're going to become a marketing expert in a very short time, I'm sure.
All right, you'll have to do another catch-up cast.
Oh yeah, no question
Follow up.
about that. But just to kind of to pedal back a little bit, or backpedal, just to backpedal. How does all this really agree with what it is that you've been looking for in terms of practice ownership? Like, we've talked a lot about what this practice is and what we can be doing and what the rocks are and stuff. Does that kind of speak back to you and say, like, yeah, this is what I want to be engaging in for the next few years, or potentially 10, 15 years?
Well, to be honest, I'm not sure. Uh, I'm
Mm,
more familiar with. I know. I mean, I should just say yes. I'm more familiar with smaller practices. I like slower schedules. I don't know that that will, be
mhm,
the case with 3 full-time hygienists. That alone is going to be plenty of time out of my day.
for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that in the earlier years of owning this practice, you could potentially be somewhat stretched here as you try to grow this practice, because it's not a functional group practice at this point. It's an underperforming or maybe slightly up to par solo practice as far as the numbers are concerned. And you're, hoping to grow it into something more profitable and a lot busier. And generally that involves some growth years. And there might be some times when you're a little bit stretched and checking a little bit more hygiene than you're comfortable with and not having quite as much time with your patients as you generally enjoy. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't have the sort of pace that you want for yourself eventually, but you're going to have to build it. I mean, it's not going to be ready made for you when you walk in. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about trying to hire someone who could help me
Actually,
get those
I
stepping
just
stones underway. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
just kind of thought, so I know we were talking about the owner staying on for a little bit. You could have them come in and just see how much of the schedule you can actually do by yourself. Because I feel like that would give you a good gauge. Like, do you need to bring on an associate? Can you do it by yourself for a little bit? And that kind of just be like a nice little test run to see what the practice is going to need.
Yeah.
It's an interesting idea. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So there's definitely going to be a lot going on there. I just, the only thing that I'm kind of concerned about is, I ask you how you feel about all this and you feel like you're not sure. And I don't need you to say yes or no. I want you to speak your truth. You know, before we go into this, I mean, you just have to make sure that this is really, what you want. And I want to make sure that you're, I think the wrong thing to do is to do something just because you've been told is the right thing to do. And that's the last thing that I want to do on this interview. It's the last thing I want the people that are being influential in your life to do. Because ultimately, the pursuit of ownership, if I may, be self-referential, is about going into ownership, knowing who you are and knowing what it is that you want, and reverse engineering a practice to fit that. Right. So like you have to be able to sort of design your lifestyle within your practice and have this ideal doctor avatar that you want to be in the practice that you want to have. And then you find something that best fits that. And, very rarely does it exactly fit that. You just sort of have a plan for how you're going to get there, sort of what by whens for how that's really going to, culminate. And when those things are cloudy, that's when there's some possibility for things not turning out quite the way you would have hoped. So that's something that I would encourage you to reach out to potentially a coach, someone that could work with you and really kind of dive deep into, what it is that you're really here for, and the dentist and the person that you're trying to be, the plans that you have for your family, the sort of, time requirements you want to have, and the clinical duties you want to have, and all these sorts of things that, require work and they require time. And I would definitely encourage you, especially at this point in the process, as things are kind of starting to move forward, to get on that and engage with it, and really iron out if this is what you really want and need for your life. Because I mean, you're in the driver's seat now.
Yeah, it's true. Just got to figure out if I've got a dream in mind, working 3 hours a day, or not 3 hours. Oh, that would be great. 3 days a week. Can you do that with any practice? Can I do it with this practice? What are the stepping stones to get there? And yeah, maybe a coach is who I need to be talking to.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we can certainly facilitate that if you'd be interested, but there's a lot of options for you. So, Dr. Pullet, thank you so much for being here. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. I hope it's been as educational as it's been for us. Payton and I both now are coming away from this with a whole new word that we can. Oh, hey, there's Calvin again, and we really appreciate that. And you've been an absolute treat.
Well, thanks so much. Pleasure talking to y'all.
All right, and I hope to get an update. This segment is still kind of young, and we haven't had a whole lot of repeat guests. But one thing I would love to see is for people that we have interviews with, and the audience becomes familiar with, to kind of see how things culminate. The next 3-6 months, whatever happens. So definitely keep us updated, and we'll kind of see where this thing goes.
Yeah, great. Will do.
All right, thank you so much. All right, Payton. So, what are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely an interesting opportunity, but I feel like one of the biggest takeaways is not to get pushed into something if you don't have an exact idea of what you want. I mean, anyone can go and buy a practice, but it's whether it fits your vision, it's whether it's something that's going to work for you long term, and it's just right for you. And I just feel like, personally, I don't feel like that was quite developed yet. Obviously, that's something that can be worked through, and pretty easily figured out. But yeah, I feel like that's the biggest thing just with
Yeah.
this episode.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, listening back to the interview, I almost feel like I kind of failed in not really pushing the vision part enough and really getting the conviction about what Dr. Pullet actually wanted out of ownership. And I think that that conversation probably could have taken up the entire interview. So I feel kind of bad about spending so much time on the practice and marketing and things like that, because those are strategic things. They're how to's. They're like some steps to, get it up to a vision. But like, as Dr. Pullet was saying, that vision is not really crystallized for her yet. And without that having happened, doing this whole thing in reverse is just a mess. Like it just doesn't make sense. And one thing that Dr. Pullet mentioned, after recording, and I believe she's okay with me sharing this, is that she felt pushed by the process a little bit. It was like this thing had fallen into her lap. People were telling her that it sounded good. Like there was good advice coming from very well-intentioned and knowledgeable people saying, "Hey, yeah, this could be a really good opportunity for you." But she's kind of like reverse engineering that into a vision that might work for her. And I just don't really believe in doing it that way, because other opportunities will come along. She does not have to look at this and say, "Oh, well, this is happening. I need to, try and figure out why this works for me and then make it work." I think that's a recipe potentially for disaster. And I obviously I wish the best for Dr. Pullet, and this whole thing may go through, and she may be in a couple of years just absolutely killing it in a group practice that doesn't just look like one, but actually is behaving like one. But I just really want to edify for the audience that, this is kind of what it looks like when people are sort of getting through that process, but without having done all the real ground vision work that is so necessary to engage in before you start getting involved in it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I feel like it's hard to look at a practice objectively and say if it's good for someone. Like at the end of the day, it's what you want out of the practice. It's what you want for your family. It's what you want for your future. So it can look good on paper, but if it's not where you want to live, if it's not the right style of practice, it's not right for you. And I feel like that's the biggest thing to take away from this interview.
Yeah, and conversely, a practice can not look so great on numbers, but actually be a really good opportunity for you. I mean, this is coming out on the tails of the interview that you guys had with Christian. You and George interviewed a guy that, the practice itself maybe wasn't super stellar and not something we would generally recommend to people. But he was right for it. And he had all the skills and mindset and vision that was going to make that a really stellar opportunity into something that was going to be great for him. And, this is kind of like the other side of that coin, where you have something that, could potentially be a quote unquote good practice, but you don't have that crystallized vision yet. And the likelihood that precipitates into something that is just exactly what Dr. Pullet figures out that she was looking for, it's a risk. You're risking yourself getting into a liability, and just hoping that it ends up looking like what you wanted. And rarely does that ever happen spontaneously. So I really hope that this interview kind of helps illustrate that for people and makes sort of a good point. I definitely want to do a better job next time of just like really focusing on vision,
Yeah, it's a learning process,
It is. And if people are getting tired of us talking about vision, I got bad news for you.
It's not going away.
For sure. It's not. But yeah, I think this is a great interview, and I appreciate the horticultural knowledge that I'm now coming forward with, and I hope the audience enjoyed it as well. And you guys will be hearing from us next week, of course.